All right, looks like we've got several folks joining. I see some new faces, I see some old faces. Really excited for this version of our Nutanix webinar. I want to say this is our fifth or sixth iteration. So I'm going to go through some quick intros of Right Systems and who we got on the call. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've evolved to the point where we're at right now with this this kind of webinar series that we're doing, and then I'm going to encourage some folks as well to log into the into the portal, get your test drive going if you want to follow along or do it afterwards. But yeah, like I said, I'm Tony Matlick. I'm the director of data center and cloud here at Right Systems. We've got Shinji Carmichael on as well. He's one of the solution architects and a very well-versed Nutanix expert, along with Sky Kearns, who is one of our senior data center engineers. And then Alina is on the call as well. She is our wonderful marketing specialist who put this together. So how we arrived at this is, we've done probably, like I said, 4 or 5 or maybe 6 of these over the last couple of years. They've been wildly successful. We've got a lot of good feedback. We've had some where, they went 20 minutes longer than they should because there's so many questions. But they've all typically been kind of a 101 version of this. So we wanted to kind of take this up to the next level. We've got a lot of existing Nutanix customers. We've got a lot of folks who've already seen the 101 version of it. So we decided, hey, let's try something a little bit different. And so we are going to be showing Prism Element, which is the Prism Central, right, Sky? Which
right.
is the full-blown version of Prism that allows you to do multiple cluster management and stuff like that, along with a few other features and bells and whistles. So what I encourage everyone on the call to do today is, as you're going through this, if questions pop up, stick them in chat. We'll answer them, accordingly. But also be looking for like, oh, it'd be really cool to dive deeper on this specific topic, or Nutanix has several other technologies that you could explore, things like NC2, which is their cloud clusters version, right? That's them running it in the cloud. Their NKP, or Nutanix Kubernetes platform. So there's a bunch of different things that I want to encourage everyone to kind of, as we're going through this, to think, hey, this is something we'd like to see in the future. Ask questions, interrupt. Sky's done this a ton of times. You're not going to throw them off. The more dialogue, the better, I would say. And we'll be monitoring chat. I'll interrupt every once in a while if we've got questions we need to answer. Shinji will be trying to answer those in lockstep. And other than that, we're just really excited to have everyone on. And feel free to reach out in the chat. And also, last thing I'll say is, if you like this and you want a more expanded, customized version of something like this for your organization, you've got other people that you want to see, we can always set up a one-off for you to do something like this. So without further ado, Sky, I'm going to kick it over to you. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
All right. Thanks, Tony. So yeah, like Tony said, my name is Sky Kearns. I'm a senior data center engineer here at Right Systems. I'm going to be turning off my camera so I can show you something a little cooler. We're going to go into the actual POC. So Nutanix was kind enough to give us a real cluster to work with, so that's kind of cool. I'm going to be popping around a little bit for everybody following along. I'm going to start off with Prism Element very quickly. I promise we won't stay there long, but just in case people were kind of wondering what that looks like and how you're accessing Prism Central, I'm going to start there. I hope. Okay, cool. So like Tony said, this is, I guess if you were to view the Prism Element webinars that we've done in the past as being like maybe the 100 level, kind of like the, hey, here's Nutanix, this is what it looks like, this is what your interface looks like. Maybe for people that are new to the platform, or people that are just kind of dipping their toes in the water, so to speak, wondering if they should switch over to Nutanix from whatever they're doing currently. It was kind of that level of involvement. Today, what we're going to be doing is taking that up just a notch. Nutanix has such a robust portfolio that we could take it up several notches and go in all sorts of different directions. Like Tony said earlier, they have platforms for Kubernetes and for microsegmentation and all these other really cool products in their portfolio that there's just not enough time in the day to kind of touch all of them. And so, as was said earlier, if there are topics that you guys want to dive deeper on, let us know. We're kind of using this to gauge interest in some of those other offshoot portfolio pieces that Nutanix has. But for today, we're going to be focused on Prism Central, which in my previous webinars, I've referenced a lot, but we've never really done a webinar on what is Prism Central. And it gets kind of confusing, right? Because there's Prism Element, and then there's Central, and then people, you kind of get it confused on which is which. I've even got tongue twisted a couple times talking to people about which is which. For those of you that don't know, Prism Element is the main single cluster management interface. So from this cluster, right, we can go in and see that there's one, from this Prism interface, we can see there's one chassis here that we're looking at. You might have multiple chassis, but it's one cluster that we're dealing with. Prism Central is dealing with all of the clusters in your environment. So it's not uncommon for a customer to have many clusters in an on-prem location and maybe several clusters in a DR location, data colo, and then maybe even have a couple clusters in AWS or Azure or something like that. That can all of those clusters can be managed from one interface with Prism Central. So if you're not using Prism Central today, there will be a requirement for it eventually, if not already, because they're actually shifting the way that you are activating licenses so that you can no longer really do it through Prism Element. You're going to have Prism Central deployed. And so we've been doing this, a Prism Central deployment as part of our generic rollout for all customers for the past, I don't know, year or so, maybe two. So if you're not using it today, you'll have a button here right under Prism Central where it'll say, deploy Prism Central, and it's just a GUI process. You can walk right through that and deploy. It's just a VM that runs on your existing Nutanix cluster. So it's not like you have to buy separate hardware or anything like that. It's almost like a ESXi has vCenter, right, that manages your whole environment. That's kind of like what Prism Central is doing. So it's just a VM. You can have it scale out. It can be a single VM, or you can scale it to multiple if you need that level of redundancy, or if you have so many nodes and VMs that you need that extra level of management. If you're already connected to Prism Central, if you load up Prism Element, you'll actually have a link right here in the upper left of your dashboard. The POC that they gave us is unnamed, but you can name your Prism Central instance if you'd like. And you just click on it, and that'll open up a new browser tab here. And immediately it's going to give us a prompt for your SSO login. If you guys are bound with like LDAP or something to that effect, maybe you log in with username at companyname.com or what have you. For our purposes here, we're going to click this link right here below, log in with a Nutanix local account. Hey, look at that, first time. Okay, so right away, I'm going to go ahead and collapse this stuff. Right away, something that I want to bring up is that there's a lot more to Prism Central than there is to Element, by several orders of magnitude. You can already see right off the bat, they didn't even try to bother making everything go into one drop-down menu. They just give you access to all this stuff right off the bat. It can get pretty overwhelming. Luckily, we can collapse these guys and kind of focus on them one at a time. There will be some moments where I'll be kind of jumping around just a little bit, because some of the items that we're going to go over today are linked together so tightly that it really behooves us to dive into them out of order. So I'll try to keep it to a minimum, but some things like categories, or projects, you might see us go back and forth on. Those are out of order, but I promise it's for the best. So this main dashboard here, you might notice this is really similar to Prism Element. It just kind of has a different coat of paint on it. It's that same familiar sort of HTML5 driven adjustable widget page that you're used to from Prism Element. They just spiced it up a little bit. These guys are all editable, of course. If you don't care about cluster memory usage, you can get rid of it and kind of customize these widgets to your liking. You can add widgets over here, and they'll give you a whole list of things, and you can search whatever you want. But if you're really interested in like your recycle bin, for example, you can add this to your dashboard, and it'll take just a moment, and then it'll add it to the dashboard. And then you'd have a view of your recycle bin right here and your retention time. So if there are certain things that you know that as an administrator of your system that you're going to want to know every day, maybe it's something like VMs with high CPU usage, or maybe you just want to look at VM inefficiencies, which is another thing that Prism Central can do. It can kind of investigate VMs and let you know through what they call intelligent operations. It can actually go in and see if certain VMs are over provisioned, under provisioned, if they're bullying other VMs, if they're dead or zombie, which is their term for VMs that have been off for a really long time, or in the case of like a zombie, a VM that's been on for a really long time, but just isn't doing anything. And meanwhile, it's consuming resources. That's especially true when you're looking at things like running Nutanix in the cloud, where having VMs turned on that aren't doing anything, as you know, is not something that you're going to want, especially when it comes time to pay that bill, right? So it can run out and do scans for all of that. It can check for anomalies in CPU and memory and all that good stuff. And you can get that reported here straight on your dashboard. So by and large, though, pretty much the same deal as Element. Again, like with many things I'm going to talk about today, it's just taking that same core concept and just bumping it up a level. And again, this is for all of your clusters. So in this specific demo, this is a real cluster that Nutanix has graciously spun up for us. But I will say that there are going to be a couple things that we're going to unfortunately have to skip over because it requires multiple clusters. But for the purposes of the demo today, things like this, like cluster quick access, that's a tongue twister. It'll just show you one line item, right? It's DM3 POC 020. So that's our Prism element. Your environment might have many of these. You might have 3, 4, 5 different clusters here. You can click on any of these and it'll open up that Prism element page for that specific cluster. So you can bookmark your Prism Central instance, and then in the morning you come in, you grab your coffee and you sit down to log in, and you get one dashboard that gives you full health across all of your clusters. So really, really cool. We're going to start by diving into the compute section here. So under our expanded compute, we can click on VMs. And you might notice that we have these little stars here next to all these icons. As you may have surmised, you can just click on that star and it adds it to a bookmark up top. So if there's things that you go to every day, like if you're always checking your VM lists and you're always checking your storage containers and you're always checking your whatever, you can click the star and it'll add it to this little bookmark view up here. And then you don't have to menu dive or remember where all these things are. I'll also say that Prism Central is always undergoing changes. So there's going to be times, even in this webinar, where I will click on something like in the administration pane, and it will let us know, hey, we've redirected this. We actually put this in the application switcher. So please start using the application switcher. What it's talking about is this drop down up here at the very top left. This is the application switcher. So if you see that come up, that's the name that they've given this guy. Again, just like Prism Element, where we had that drop down that kind of gave you everything in the whole world of Nutanix. Prism Central has this drop down for the different core components that make up Prism Central. So we're going to pop around in some of these way more than others. We'll be in infrastructure quite a bit, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on files and a little bit of time on Admin Center, and we're just going to briefly touch on some of the intelligent operations as well, which come with higher levels of the Prism licensing. So go ahead and uncheck that bookmark there. So from the VM list, something that is really cool that you may have noticed is that we can actually display more than just a couple rows here. So that was a weird thing about Prism Element, is that they'd only let you have so many VMs in a table. 1 through 10 of 27. So if you have hundreds of VMs, this is kind of annoying, right? Because you have to flip through all these pages. Prism Central, they give you a little more flexibility and they let you put more rows per page. So we can keep kind of scrolling down here and save you a little bit of time. But this is the basic view for VMs, and this is for VMs across all of your clusters. So if you have multiple clusters, this is really cool because you're able to see groups of VMs or individual VMs that are on or off or are struggling in some way, or if they're consuming resources, or if you need to make multiple changes or compare two VMs. This stuff can all be done from here. We have all these filters over here. If we click Modify Filters, you can actually go through here and narrow them down by cluster. If you're like, yeah, that's great, but we have this dev test cluster that we don't care about, you can come down here and you can say, contains, and then the name of your main cluster, and sort it by that. So that's kind of cool. They give you options to not only take a look at everything, but also kind of laser focus on certain elements or certain clusters or VMs if you want. I think for most people, one of the cool things that I like to remind people of is that when you're dealing with multiple clusters, one of the cool things that Prism Central can do is it can actually install Nutanix guest tools automatically without interaction with the actual underlying OS from a user perspective. So if you're used to, for example, in Prism Element, maybe you've done this before where you click on something and you say manage guest tools because you want to install NGT, and you mount it, and then you go into the console and you access the virtual CD drive and you open it and you next finish and you reboot. That's fine if you only have a small number of VMs that you're dealing with. Prism Central can do all that automatically. So something that is really cool, like let's say this desktop 03 here, right? We can see that it has an unknown operating system, and it's telling us, if we mouse over it, it says, hey, you need to set up NGT on this guy. So one of the cool things that Nutanix can do with Prism Central, and it can do this for up to 60 VMs at a time, so you can do multiple VMs, is you can come here and check the box, actions, guest tools, set up NGT. And it's asking us, hey, is this a new NGT installation or are you configuring something existing? We're only doing one VM, so it's only showing one VM, and we're going to do a new. But just to show you how simple this is, and we'll enable VSS and self-service restore. And we're going to say install automatically. And you can say different credentials, or if you have like a domain admin or some sort of a service account, you can use that. For us, we're going to use administrator. And then after we enter the password, it says, okay, well, in order for NGT, just like VMware tools, in order for it to get properly installed, we need to restart this guy. Do you want to do that immediately, like right when the install's done? Is this something after hours that you don't care if the VM restarts immediately, or maybe it's just a less important VM that can be restarted during the day? You can restart it at a preferred time, and then you fill in the blank on time. Or you can say, hey, skip the restart. I'll decide when I want to restart this, at my own leisure. For this purpose, for this demo, we're just going to restart it immediately. So we click OK, and we can see it's running here, and it gives us a task. And so as you can imagine, if you have a couple different teams of people that are spinning up VMs, or maybe you're just deploying one application that has like a lot of VMs that are associated with it, maybe they're all working together, or maybe they're a bunch of SQL servers, I don't know. It's cool that you can come in here and just check each individual server that you want, and then go through that process that I just showed and get NGT installed on all of those machines. That's not something that you could really do in Prism Element. So Prism Central, definitely, like right off the bat, from the very first drop down here, we're seeing benefits from managing larger environments. And I mean, even if you're in a smaller environment, this is, I think most people would agree, this is still pretty useful, right? Being able to instantly do this kind of thing. You can do 60 VMs at a time, and I think there's a limit of something like 1,500 or so per cluster VMs that you can run and do this on. But you can also enable self-service restore with this. As you saw, there's those the checkboxes for enabling VSS and enabling self-service restore. So just like you would do with a normal NGT install, you can do all this stuff. And we're not going to wait for this to complete. There's no sense in that, but we will come back to it so you can see. But when it's done, it'll give you the option. It'll show you what OS it's on. It'll give you a little more insight into things. We're also able to do some other bonus stuff here. You may have noticed that I have a test VM here that's powered off and a label. So the big thing with Prism Central is it is all about categories and labels and making sure that you can make sense of the potential mess of managing multiple clusters, right? Whenever you have a single pane of glass for managing hundreds of VMs, across multiple clusters or maybe across different availability zones, keeping everything organized becomes extremely important. And this is where I'm going to shift a little bit into talking about categories. So from each of these VMs, we can kind of dive down into them. We can click on them and see everything that's going on. And one of the things that we'll see right here front and center is categories. So a lot of things in Prism Central don't let you select individual elements to perform actions on them, but rather they want you to have things assigned into a category. They want you to take that VM and put it into a little box and give that box a function. So we can see for this desktop that we just installed NGT on, we can see that it's a part of a column application pool. It's part of a project, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Its OS type is Windows. So some of these are automatic, right? It's detecting that it has Windows installed based on the fact that we installed NGT and it pulled the guest OS info. So it automatically puts it into a bucket called Windows. And from there, you could design maybe a playbook that says every night at midnight, restart all Windows servers. And that's probably not the one that you would want to design, but I'm just saying in general terms, you can have these playbooks that target specific categories. And things like doing disaster recovery orchestration, which we only have one cluster here. So there's only so much I can do to talk about disaster recovery, but I will hit on it a little bit and give you some of the highlights. I'm just not going to be able to walk us through it visually. But things like disaster recovery become really important when you're dealing with categories, protection policies, saying, hey, we want to back up all of our SQL servers at the same time. Hey, these are 4 domain controllers. We're going to give them the category of DC, let's say, and everything that gets the category of DC, if it's ever powered off, I want you to instantly restart it. I want you to automatically back it up every day or every 6 hours or whatever your policy calls for. That's something that Prism Central is granting you that Prism Element didn't really have the bandwidth for. So you'll see that come up a lot. You'll see references to categories. And just so you know, that's the big difference there between the way that Prism Element and Prism Central does things. Prism Central is trying to do things in a stateful way that's more declarative, and it's targeting specific categories. Whereas Prism Element, you're probably used to just saying, hey, this VM, back it up now, kind of a thing. Prism Central just takes that a step further by doing what it thinks is best for you by having you assign categories. And you can, it's not difficult to do. The concept of it is not really that crazy. We can come down here and say manage categories off of a right click. And you can see that we can remove categories, we can add categories that we've created, we can do all that stuff from here. So it's not like it's a very involved process. It's just something that you have to do when you spin up a couple of VMs. If they're not automatically put into a bucket, you have to assign them categories that make sense. And you can see here that this guy, kind of timely, this guy did finish. So your NGT was installed, and now you can see that we have a couple more options, and that Server 2022 data center was detected as its OS, and now this guy is good to go. Again, a lot of this stuff is similar to Prism Element in the way that you have access to the same information, but it's across a much more broad scope of VMs. We can do things like create host affinity policies. And again, you're going to see a lot of references to categories here. Sometimes people might set up like a host affinity policy. Again, if you have like a SQL that's only licensed to exist on a certain host, you could come in and say, hey, let's create a VM host affinity policy in here, and let's make sure it only lives on node 01. It's pretty cool that you're able to come in here and do all this stuff. And again, this is all from the Prism Central interface, so that's pretty neat. The other thing I wanted to show here, and it kind of segues into the next clickable entity, is templates. So the way that Prism Element, if you've worked with it, and if you came from a world of like VMware where maybe you use templates a lot, you may have been disappointed in the way that Prism Element was kind of not giving you its all when it comes to templates. Maybe you've done this move where you spin up a VM and then you run like the out-of-box experience switch or sysprep or something like that. And then you power down that VM, never to talk about it ever again. And then you clone VMs based off of that powered off VM. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. So if you're using Prism Central, you can actually just create real templates. So the concept of templates gets reintroduced into Prism Central. So you can come into a VM here, take this VM that we just installed NGT on, and we can create VM template off of it. And we can name it whatever, tutorial template. Oh yeah, okay. Really bad names. And then you can, if it's Linux, you can reference a cloud init file, or if it's Windows, you can You can have a sysprep here, and you can just paste in your whatever configuration scripts that you have. If you have ubi scripts or whatever, syspreps or things that'll strip keys out, whatever you want to run to make this a nice little gold image for you guys, you can certainly put that in here. You can also do a guided script and enter in things like license keys, usernames and passwords that you want for it to be configured, what you want that host name to be when it turns on. It's pretty limited here, right? But it's certainly better than nothing. I would guess if you're probably doing this pretty frequently, you probably have a custom script you want to run. We're going to go ahead and say no customization just for the purpose of this. We'll click next, and it's going to say, hey, here's all the stuff that you had on this VM. Just so you know, you're about to create a template with this guy. And we say, okay. And then it'll go through, and we're already done. So it created that template VM. And now if we go into templates, you can see that we have a tutorial template. From here, you can just check the box and say, yeah, deploy it. And we're going to say, test VM template RSI. Okay, and we're going to say one of them, but you can also do multiple. You can say, let's say 3 of them, and we're going to start it with an index number of 0, and it'll just append that -0 to the end of the VM. So if you want to spin up a batch of VMs really quickly off of one template, you can do that from here. We'll just do one. It's going to, again, remind us, hey, this is all the stuff you have. And these are the categories we're going to give it. And it's going to inherit those categories from that cloned VM that we had earlier. So it's all these column application stuff are going to be put right in it. If it's a part of a project, which it is, it's going to put that right in that project tag. Say deploy. Cool. So it created and updated the VM, and it's good to go. We're going to kick back over to our VM list. And there it is right here. Test VM template, RSI. So that whole process of creating a template and then spinning up our first VM from a template took like a couple minutes. And the actual process, once we have that template in the system, the actual process of deploying that template was a matter of seconds. I think it was like 10 seconds or less to deploy that after we clicked OK. So pretty powerful stuff. And I think that for people that are using Prism Element today to kind of do that, their sort of janky way of handling templates, I think this is a much better way. And it allows you to clean up like those files in your environment that live at the very end of your VM list that are called like __ server 2022 template VM dash 2026 or something like that. This will allow you to blow those away and kind of clean up your inventory.
Right on. Thanks, Guy. I'm going to take a quick break right now and just remind everybody, if you've got questions, put them in chat. We're monitoring that. Great job so far, Sky. I think that we're going deeper and wider than we have in the past. So hopefully this is resonating with everyone. And like I said, continue to put those questions in chat and we'll answer them. Hopefully some of you are following along on the platform as well. So
sure. And yeah, I know that the platform demo, I went through it myself like a week or two ago. I know that it's missing some things. So if you can't follow along like exactly, don't worry about it. Like it's just a limitation of the test drive. But by and large, it does give you an idea of what can be done. And if you're running Nutanix today, I mean, you could certainly just launch your own Prism Central too and start configuring that. And I'm trying to hit on what I think are things that most people are interested in. But like Tony said, if there's things that you guys are more interested in that I'm maybe glossing over, and you have questions, let us know. Or if they're topics for a future webinar, let me know, and we can certainly start doing that. Okay. Where should we go to next? I saw there was a question that came up really quickly.
Oh yeah.
Was that for the logs? So there's a couple ways that you can do logs in Prism Central. Obviously, if you're coming from vCenter, I think it has, for the most part, you have access to the same amount of data, if not more. But a lot of this stuff can be done through this generic page here. So if you want to go through, this is full audit trails. They have access to all of the tasks that are being run. So every little thing that's being run here is being tracked in here. You can route this stuff to, if you have like a SIM or something to that effect, you can route your logs. You can do hit logs and all that stuff. Let me see if we can get here a little deeper. All of the events that happen, and these are all you can filter all of this stuff as well. Alerts for everything, email configurations. If you want these alerts, anything here to be sent specifically to an email, you can set up your email here and get digests. So it'll kind of give you an all-in-one inclusive. You can get custom settings for these. Add multiple people, customize your email content, all that stuff. And you can have these done every day, or only done if you receive like criticals. You can also generate and download log bundles as well. If that's something that you want, you can do like log collection. So we're not going to really touch on Kubernetes. Kubernetes is something that, if you guys are interested in containerization, or if you're like running something like Docker or something to that effect today, Nutanix does have a full platform for Kubernetes, and it really excels if you're looking to build out like cloud native stuff. If you're looking to build out a container that hosts an application and do testing and spin up and spin down things and be able to migrate them to and from like an NC2 instance or something to that effect, that is something that you can definitely do in here. As you might imagine, that is something that goes a little bit beyond what we're touching on today. But there is a marketplace that we can access, and I'll just click on it really quick just so you can see. So from here, we can take a look at all of the categories for that Nutanix. It should give us more here. It's stuck loading, but essentially it's a marketplace for taking a look at everything that Nutanix offers. Here we go. So for example, if you wanted to run Nutanix files, you can get this. If anybody has used like a platform services online before, this is very similar to that. Or maybe if you have like a Roku TV and you want to install YouTube or something, it's very similar to how that works. You click get, and then it takes you through a guided UI that lets you walk through all of the different customization steps that you need to get up and running. And there's a little more to it than that, but still it's cool that they have like a marketplace for driving everything based on the GUI. And again, that's that application switcher. So that put us in the admin center. Most of the time, you're going to be working in the infrastructure. Good. Let's give it a refresh here. All right. Okay. All right, OVAs. So this is something that's really cool that, again, gets added into Prism Central that you didn't really have access to. Questions that had come up in previous webinars, there were definitely a few, more than a few, that asked, well, what do we do with virtual appliances? Or if I have, how do I import an OVF? And the old way was kind of clunky, right? Through Prism Element, they would like make you like extract for the individual vDisks and then like do a conversion to like QCOW, and it was kind of clunky the way that it worked. Prism Central has native OVA uploads. So if you guys have like a virtual appliance that's in an OVA format, you can just click the button now and say which cluster you want to target. And you can either do it from a local repo or you can do it from an online if you're pulling it from an accessible online source. So you can say, here's the checksum for it, here's the name of it, and I'm going to go ahead and browse on my system to where that OVA is, and you can upload it and then deploy. They have a web OVA here, and you can deploy it as a VM immediately, and it'll just appear in your VM list like everything else. So again, these are things that I think that a lot of people had complaints about with Prism Element, and they just hadn't deployed Prism Central yet to see what some of these things are. Things like templates and OVAs. Those are things that, you know, real sysadmins are going to be doing every day. Like, these are things that you're going to be probably doing pretty often. So trying to highlight some of these things that are more the day-to-day, because Prism Central can do so much. But when it comes down to it, what are the things that you're going to be doing frequently, right? And so those are the ones I'm trying to hit on early. Images, same sort of deal, right? This is all GUI driven. If you have to add an image, you know, you can upload things. Some people ask about the difference here. There's add and import. So adding an image will allow you to upload like an image file or a VM disk directly to a specific cluster. And then import basically takes that metadata and places it on the Prism Central. So Prism Central can be in charge of deploying those images and mounting those images across clusters, but the actual Prism Central VM doesn't store that. That's still stored on the originating cluster. It's just kind of a metadata forwarder that's saying, hey, this cluster has this server 2022 ISO, and this one has this one. So you can upload them and import them directly from here. And they have placement policies as well. Again, if you have multiple clusters, it allows you to you know, govern where they go. There's also a list whenever you go to add something. It'll say the next page, it'll say select a location, and that's the same deal. It's just asking you where you're wanting to put that specifically cluster by cluster, because again, Prism Central doesn't host that. It's the clusters that are still doing all the storage there. And catalog items, this is stuff, again, this is mostly for things that are coming out of the marketplace. We're not going to spend too much time there. Storage, you know, storage is a weird one. This is one that, again, when you only have one cluster, you're probably not going to spend a lot of time here. It's something that is cool if you have multiple clusters, though. As you notice here, there's the default container that everybody is using. But then beyond that, there's all these Nutanix management shares and containers. These are spun up by services that you enable. So if you are deploying Nutanix files, they don't want to deploy everything in your default container. Nutanix is smart enough to know that you probably don't want to balloon out your default container with a bunch of junk. So it creates its own files container specifically for that. But it does that for every little microservice that you add. But it is nice that you can have this all across all of your clusters. It's just there's not that much to look at with only one. But same sort of deal here. This is alerts, events. This is all summarized across all clusters. Volume groups. Again, this kind of references back to files, which maybe it makes sense to jump into files next. And then storage policies. These ones are inherited from the cluster itself, but you can also create storage policies, and you can do things like have RF and encryption and things like that automatically set up when you create new storage containers. Again, this is more of like a widespread if you're doing automation. I think for most users, they probably don't care about this too much. Most of your storage containers are set up in Prism Element, and then you just go along your way and not really look back. But if you do want to see them across all of your clusters, you can see them here. And with that, I want to pop over quickly one thing that we have talked about. I'm going to go into files really quick. So we've looked at files very briefly in previous webinars, and people had questions about it, and we never really had a functioning version because we get these clusters from Nutanix like a day or so in advance, and it doesn't really give you a lot of time to set up really the cool demos. For this Prism Central demo, they actually gave us a copy of files here. So you can see that it was deployed using Prism Element, but and it's only using one VM, but it gives us the ability to click in here and look at what the files overview has. So this is something that people have asked me about both online during webinars, and that also customers have just asked me in general after their cluster was deployed, is what is the deal with files? This is the deal with files. So now we have this working dashboard that you can see what files looks like. So a lot of people have asked, well, how does this work? We're used to using a Windows file server. How does that work compared to if I were to run it with this like, KVM backed virtual instance that's running all of my file shares? Because really the underlying architecture of how the CVM functions and redistributes traffic, that same secret sauce, so to speak, is being applied to the Nutanix file shares. So if you guys wanted to, you could, for example, come in here and create a share. I already have a share here, but you get to choose what you want to call it. Description, it'll automatically do a share path for you, or you can enable one here if you want to name it something, have a different path for it, how large you want it, and it gives you a visual overview of what's going on. We're only doing one we only have one file server VM, but you can do a distributed share. So if you guys are coming from the Windows world where you have like distributed namespaces and like one global namespace that targets shares across different file servers, that would be distributed. Right now, we're just doing standard because we just have that one VM. And then you can do protocol access for SMB or NFS. And you can enable things like compression, self-service restore if NGT is installed on that VM. That's kind of cool. Block file types. If you want to come in here and say, yeah, this is all fine and dandy, but there's no reason an exe should be in our PDF folder or something like that. You can add a file extension here to block all executables on a Windows share. And then they have options for worms. So write once, read many. Access-based enumeration, if you want only the people who have viewing rights to see the actual files there, and all these fun things like SMB3 encryption. You can come in here and enable those or disable them to your heart's content. You can also set up your NTFS permissions right here. We're going to give everyone full control because everybody loves that, right? And we're going to go ahead and create. And then just like all of our other tasks here, it'll show up here as a task that's being created. And eventually, here it is. And eventually we'll have a share. And there we go. We have a share called test. And then if we had a machine on the same subnet as this test, we could connect to it with an MMC if you wanted to. And we can take a look at everything that's going on in this share. So we can take a look at throughput. We can take snapshots of individual shares, quota policies. This is all the stuff that you get from Nutanix files that you didn't get through Prism Element if you weren't using the files service. So this is really all Prism Central is doing is kind of connecting you to the files instance that's occurring on Element. So if you have files deployed, you could get something similar to this already. It just gives you another landing point for it. Another one of the cool things we can do in here is we can take a look at alerts and events and data management. You can take a look at the different protection policies that you have. If you want, you can fail these over to different sites if you have availability zones configured. All that stuff can be done straight from here. They have a built-in antivirus, and you can upload your own like Yara files. You can forward this stuff to ICAP servers, run reports, do all this stuff that I think that Windows servers can also do, but it requires so much more effort and so much more scripting. It's cool that you can get this done right out of the gate. Obviously, there's not a lot of interesting information here because it's a test environment that doesn't have any files on these shares. But I think you can imagine just seeing this, how this stuff can look like in your own environment where you have potentially thousands or more files that are being shared across different servers. It's cool that you can take a look at a glance, see what's going on in your environment. They'll give you recommendations if certain shares are being hammered more than others. It'll look for anomalies like, hey, a mass delete just happened. What's that all about? Or, hey, all of these .doc files just got their extensions changed to .lok or something like that, right? It can come in here and it'll throw that flag and say, hey, what's going on? You guys might want to look at this. And if you need to, you can just revert that share individually back from a snapshot that you had. And I will also mention, it's a good time as any, that they do give you a terabyte of storage to play with. So if this is something that you want in your environment, maybe even just to see if you like it or not, you should be able to deploy this today and get quite a bit of functionality out of it, up to a terabyte of storage. So pretty cool. And then for if you want more storage than that, or I mean, if you have under a terabyte of storage in your environment, then hey, you're golden. If you have more and you want to use more, you would just need a license increase to use more. And it comes up a lot, just so we're clear. This is licensed storage. It's not like you're getting additional disks shipped to you or something. You already own the storage. They're licensing you for the storage that you have. So it's just carving off storage that you originally have for the rest of your infrastructure, and it's letting you license this feature. But they give you a terabyte to play with, so pretty cool if you're looking to go, if you're on existing Linux or Windows. I think it's a bigger play for Windows, right? Because you get to this point where you maybe have one or more distributed file shares across a couple servers, and maybe it's the time of the month for you guys to be doing patching or something to that effect. And now you have to maybe fail over a share or take servers offline in a certain order while you do Windows patching, and then oops, it blue screened, and now you know it's not coming back. You don't have to worry about that stuff with having distributed shares on Nutanix, because it follows the same process that their lifecycle manager follows. So it's going to reboot those file server VMs, assuming you have more than one, and it'll do it automatically for you. So updates are transparent in the background. They're done in a rolling fashion. And once the old file server comes back online, it just continues down the list and does the next server. So it's the exact same methodology that they use to upgrade individual hosts in Nutanix. Let's say you're doing a CVM update or a AHV hypervisor update, same deal. It's going to take you through the exact same process. It's all guided. It's all a next finish wizard sort of platform. So pretty cool. And they give you a terabyte of it to play with. So, you know, you really got nothing to lose if you just want to spend an afternoon spinning up Nutanix files and playing around with things. The other question that comes up a lot with Nutanix files is, well, how do I get my data there? Like once I spin up files, now what? Great, now I have these file shares. How do I actually get my data there? There's a couple ways you can do that. You can do it straight through this interface. There's an option for it. There's also one of the things that I'm going to show if we have time at the tail end here is Nutanix Move, which ties in with the question of, okay, we want to get Nutanix. How do I get my ESXi VMs over to Nutanix? How does that process work? The answer to both of those questions is Nutanix Move. So Nutanix Move, we can see here from our infrastructure, they were kind enough to give us some VMs here that run Move. So we have this user one Move VM. Okay, so it has an IP of 1055.20.62, so 10.55.20.62. And we can see here it says connection's not private because there's no cert for it. We're going to go ahead and say log in. Oh yeah, they want, it's going to be the default here, I believe. Let me see. I think I actually changed it last night. I did. Okay. I made it even more secure for some reason. Cool. So when we log into Move, you can see right off the bat, it's asking you, hey, are you looking to migrate VMs or files? I don't know how much more easy they could make this, quite honestly. So we're going to say VM just for the purpose of this. And I've already added this over here, but literally what's happening here is you add, if you're moving from ESXi, which we can't demo because we are not linked to an ESXi cluster right now, but for the purposes of the demo, we can click add environment. This is how easy this is. You say VMware ESXi, give it a friendly name, give it the IP of your vCenter server, and then maybe your administrator at vSphere.local, for example, username and password, and it's going to add your environment right here. It's going to say, you know, ESXi instead of AOS, and you'll have a cluster here, and it'll have VMs in it, and you'll be able to click into it and view all of the VMs. In this case, we're looking at an AHV cluster, but we're in imagination land. I'm imagining that you're coming from ESXi here, and it's giving you this all of these options for saying, hey, look, these are all of the VMs that exist in your environment. What do you want to do with them? They're powered on or off. These are the clusters they live on. And you would just create a migration plan. Again, we can't do it because we only have one cluster, and you can't put the same cluster in here twice. But this is how simple it is. We quite literally add your source and your destination. And here our destination would be AOS, and our source would be an ESXi cluster. And you create a migration plan, and it's the same sort of GUI-driven plan that you would see throughout Lifecycle Manager or anything else. It makes it as simple as it possibly can for you. It gives you a list of VMs. It says, which ones do you want to migrate? And what are some credentials that we could use to go in there and take your VMware tools out and slap on NGT? And it just gives you prompts for those things, and you can do groups of VMs and migrate them whenever you feel like it. the process, another question that comes up is, well, how does the cutover process happen? Well, the cutover process happens only when you click the cutover button. So for a lot of people, they'll just initiate the migration, quote unquote here, and the migration will get a full copy using leveraging vCenter snapshots. It'll get a full copy of that VM, okay? And then every day or every couple hours, it'll take a snapshot of the deltas, and it'll just keep doing that until you're ready. And then when you're ready, you'll get a button that says cutover, and it'll only give you that button when it's fully snapped and ready to go. So you click that cutover button for that VM or group of VMs. It takes one final snap. It powers it off, takes that final snap to get all the deltas, and then it cuts over that VM and disconnects the NIC from the source. So you don't have to worry about somebody coming in the very next day, maybe a junior sysadmin, and powering on that domain controller that you already migrated or what have you. It disconnects the NIC from the source side, but doesn't delete the VM, so you still have fallback if there's something goes wrong. But the actual cutover process when you're ready to make the migration is usually a matter of just a few minutes. And it's more or less the time it takes for your VM to shut off and turn back on again. Because at that point, the delta change is going to be not very much data in 99% of scenarios. If you have something highly transactional, okay, well, there's an asterisk by your case. But for most people, we're looking at like just a couple minutes for a cutover. So yeah, you could cut over a file server during a lunch break if you wanted to. So hopefully that answers some questions that people might have. I apologize for not having multiple clusters here to show you that whole process. There's just there's licensing issues and reasons why we can't do that, but that's how it functions. And if this is something that you guys are interested in, or if you have specific questions about this that you want to take offline, please let me or anybody else know, and we can kind of walk you through this process and show you how it works. That same process is used for migrating files. So again, you would just set up your shares, your destinations, and your sources, and create a migration plan for it. And it's all GUI driven. We can't get very far along in this, but I'll go ahead and do it anyways. And you could do a sync or you can do a mirror. So it's automatically redirecting incoming files from your source to your destination, or you could just do a periodic sync. And you just say, here's the target. It's the Nutanix file server, and we enter in all the stuff for the Nutanix file server. And then you do the same thing for your source. Select your shares, next, finish. And then when you're ready, maybe on a weekend or something, you can just gracefully cut them over. So some people like doing it this way. This is relatively new. Older versions of Move didn't have this, but Nutanix Files is becoming more and more of a bigger play. So you're going to see and hear people talk about this a little bit more often. Back in the day, I think a lot of admins were perfectly content with just running robocopy scripts and just letting it run. And then the day of running another robocopy to get deltas.
So, hey, Sky, just real quick on that, if I could, expand out on it, pull that thread a little, as people like to say, compared to other, tools that you've used, whether it be a backup tool or other migration tools, how does this tool work? I mean, is it comparable? Is it better? Is it easier? What's been your experience?
So the benefit of a tool like this is that Nutanix built it from the ground up. And as you might imagine, Nutanix has as a company, they really like it when you migrate to their platform. And that shouldn't come as a shock to anybody, right? I think the big advantage that it has over other products is, for one, simplicity. I mean, I know that we couldn't go through the entire process here, but you can see, I think everybody here can click the big blue button that says create migration plan. So it doesn't require any extra infrastructure. It's a VM that you just can deploy through the marketplace in Prism Central. If you're on Prism Element, you can still do it as well, by the way. You just deploy your own VM that you download from Nutanix. It's just an image. It's a virtual appliance. When you're done with it, you can blow it away and never touch it again. It has similarities in the sense that there are other products, right? Like Veeam does something similar with the way that it can do your deltas, and then when you're ready to cut over, it gives you the storage migration or whatever. But this does it all from one pane of glass on a system that's built from the ground up to be integrated into Nutanix. One of the features that I think is the coolest is if you've ever done a migration, if anybody out there has ever done a migration from ESXi to literally anything else, whether it's Hyper-V or VMware or whatever, the cool thing is this will automatically strip out your VMware tools and it'll automatically deploy NGT on it for you. A lot of tools don't do that. A lot of other vendors will migrate and they'll say, yeah, go ahead and leave VMware tools on there for us. That way we can retain your IP and your MAC address because you're not disconnecting that VNIC. And then what happens is that VM gets migrated, and now you have VMware tools on a VM that's running on Hyper-V or something. And those tools are borderline impossible to get off now because they can't make an API call back to their VNIC because it doesn't exist anymore. So you have a weird chicken and egg problem. This eliminates that. I think for people that are migrating large groups of VMs, this is awesome because it lets you group up VMs by their category and migrate them in a large group. This has a lot of upside. I think for people that are going the Nutanix route, I think that this is the very clear, obvious play. And it's cool because if you want to handle this on your own, you totally can. If you want to offload this to another team member and give them permissions to do this, they can handle it for you as well. We can handle it for you. I mean, it's just it's really open and robust. And I think that it does what a lot of tools do better just because it's a native tool. Like I said, Nutanix has a lot of interest in you coming from whatever hypervisor you're on to AHV. And that's what this tool does. Okay, so I wish there was more to show you here, but there's not. It's pretty cut and dry. Are we looking on time here? Okay. Cool. Okay, network and security. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I know that some people are interested in microsegmentation and what they used to call flow. I don't even think they call it that anymore. But there's really not a lot here from the demo perspective. You can take a look at all of your virtual switches here for individual clusters or switches that span clusters. You can make changes. Here's your default VS0. You can take a look at all of the ports that are being consumed across all of your hosts. I don't know why they don't make this just one big window, but instead they make you scroll down in a window within a window. If anybody from Nutanix is on the call, maybe run that one up the flagpole and see if you can get that changed. But it's cool. It lets you see all of the individual uplinks that are constituted in this vSwitch, and it allows you to update that. You can change MTU, change your different uplink ports here. And you can do this. The cool thing, you can always do this in Prism Element, but the cool thing is now we have an interface where you can do it across all your clusters. And that, again, you're going to see that a lot in Prism Central, just the general upgrade being that you can do it for multiple clusters. I kind of hit on the things that are individual that you can take advantage of from a single cluster. I think from here on out, most of the things are about, well, what can I do with multiple clusters? If you're extending any of your networks, layer 2, layer 3 stuff into a cloud or into another data center, these next items become interesting. There's not a lot we can do here, but if you have a need for creating VPCs, you can create a private virtual private cloud here. They essentially, for these virtual private clouds, what happens is it creates like a logical isolated network and gives you control over your IP space and your routing. So each VPC contains like a logical router, more or less, that connects the subnets together. And then you can use those VPCs to connect to other VPCs. And if those VPCs are local, cool. If they're in the cloud, even cooler, because now you can kind of stretch that network from VPC to VPC. So not a lot we can do here from the demo perspective, but this is much more of an in the weeds discussion. If this is something that you're interested in, let us know. I just wanted to show they do have the option for network load balancers. We don't have a VPC set up in this demo, which is a requirement, so I can't show you too much, but it's cool that it shows you like this like topographical view so you can visualize what's happening here with your load balancing. So if you guys have like web servers or external subnets and you want to put some IPs in front of them, that's cool that you can do that all here from a load balancer perspective. And then the other side of that coin, right? Instead of many funneled into one, let's do one to many here. And you can do that with mirror sessions. So you can create like a mirror. Let's say you want to forward this onto like a capture server. If you're doing like forensics, or if you're just looking to get a deeper dive into what's going on in your network, you can route that traffic, create a mirror setup and route it from any cluster, any vSwitch. And we can't go all the way through here, but I'll just show you. So you can take a look at like your source ports, individual ports. Let's say we want to do, I don't know, 53 or whatever on this NIC and on this, and 53 would be like a DNS, right? So you can see who's making DNS requests based on it being routed to multiple machines. So you can take all the stuff from your source and you can route it to your destination. And these are just drop-down boxes. You just select which VM you want, which MAC address you want for all the stuff. So that's all doable as well. Floating IPs, connectivity, let's see. One of these is not like the other. So the deep dive into flow goes well beyond the purpose of this call, but they do have the ability to do like full microsegmentation. So a lot of software-defined firewall applications can be done here. So they already have a couple built in. I created like a demo one, but they have a forensic policy here. And you can see that you can either monitor these or enforce them strictly. So if you just want to see what's going on or what would happen if you were to enforce it, you could come in here. And it works in this weird sort of monkey in the middle scenario where they have your inbound stuff going to whatever is here in the middle. In this case, it's a quarantine policy, so there's quarantines in the middle. And then outbound traffic. So if you have a forensic team or you have like a cyber event and you want to really get into the weeds on this, or let's say like a cyber team shows up and they say, hey, for insurance purposes, we need to like audit this. You can set up these policies and show them exactly what's going on. You can set up traffic mirroring to give them all that packet capture they could ever dream of. If you want to see like which desktops here, I don't know if you guys can see it, the little ants marching line here. I'll mouse over it, but I set up one for monitoring DNS here on 53. Just like, are any requests coming from this server to this one? And is this server making any requests outbound using the same? You can do this, and this might seem like kind of a nice to have, but you can actually do a lot of cool things with this. Anybody who's seeking, like, let's say you decommission a domain controller or something and you want to see, hey, do we have any like printers or devices or VMs out there that are like still looking to this guy for time sync? Are they still looking to this guy for DNS or for like Kerberos authentication over this port? Is anybody trying to SSH into this server that we decommission that's not running AD services on it or anything like that? It allows you to like set up policies and in real time see what traffic is coming in and out. So that is something that's cool. That is that's a pro feature, I believe, but it used to be called Nutanix Flow, but it's just their micro segmentation. So pretty cool. You can do, and I'm just scratching the surface here. You can do a tremendous amount. You can set up quarantine strict policies and isolate VMs. You can say VM A can never talk to VM B no matter what. I'm going to create like a brand new security policy, and it's going to be an isolate environment policy. And we're going to say this VM and this VM are not friends. They cannot talk to each other, and you just kind of select which VMs you want. You can also get this going with individual applications. If you guys have your own application, like let's say you have like a GIS app for imaging and you don't want it to ever talk to something else that has some level of personally identifiable information, you can create isolation rules for that with Nutanix microseg. So. Again, the security dashboard is something that like you could really spend all day on this, but at a glance, it's just a security-driven version of the same dashboard that we saw at the start. It's narrowing down your Prism Central entities and your clusters themselves, and it's letting you know what your problems are. It has intrusion detection and network segmentation, all that stuff. It'll let you know if your password strength isn't strong enough for these guys. And you could also run individual scans as well for this stuff. You can do like a refresh and it'll like go out and rescan everything. It takes forever, but you can do that here. So really there's a lot that can be done here in terms of like holistically taking a look at not just one cluster, but your entire environment. Very cool. This is another thing that maybe would be useful regardless of if you have 1 or 10 clusters that you're managing. They've actually given you the ability to reset passwords for controller VMs and for specific accounts on those controller VMs, as well as their hypervisors. So if you've ever had to do this before, you maybe opened up like that Nutanix KB article that you scroll down to the bottom of, and it says kind of select your hypervisor, and you look into the AHV section, and there's this really long script. It's like an all SSH script, right? And it prompts you for password changes. It's like 1,000,000 characters long. I don't even try typing it. I always copy paste it. But instead of having to do that now, if you ever have to like reset passwords that are past their expiry policies, you can come in here and just say, hey, for this cluster, this root account, go ahead and change this password. And they're going to say, yeah, cool. What's the existing password? And what do you want the new password to be? And it goes through and changes that for all of the hypervisors in your environment that are connected to Prism Central. That is really cool. If you ever have a cyber event and you need to quickly change a password that has been compromised, or a disgruntled employee or something like that, you can go in here immediately and just with a couple clicks, as clear as day, can just come in here and set passwords and change those passwords if you have access to do so. This is a pretty cool feature. This is new. I haven't got a chance to use this yet. I think it came in the 7.0 update that got rolled out. So very new stuff. It's cool. It's something that probably should have had a GUI a long time ago and just didn't. But hey, here we are, and we have it now. So that's cool. I'm going to briefly talk about this. I know that we're on a time stretch here, and we only have one cluster, so quite frankly, there's only so much I can say. But one of the big pros of Prism Central is the availability of doing VM orchestration, doing failovers, doing failbacks, doing a test failover, creating availability zones, all that good stuff. Prism Central is great for that. It's an all-in-one sort of all-you-can-eat buffet in terms of disaster recovery. I would say probably the cool thing that it does is it takes what a lot of other competitor products do and just keeps it all within the same pane of glass and the same ecosystem. Like nothing is worse, I think, in my opinion, than having an actual disaster in your organization and then having to juggle multiple different products to get the result that you want to get your system back online. I don't know if anybody here has done like a tabletop exercise where they talk about it, but it's pretty lame when you have to first say, okay, what's affected? What hypervisor is it on? Cool. What storage is that hypervisor on? Oh, a different company, right? Because ESXi is not making storage shelves, right? So we probably have it on like a Tegile or something. Okay, so now we're getting a storage vendor involved. And what's our backup disaster recovery? Oh, we're using like Zerto or something. Okay, so get them on the phone too. Like you can see this spirals out of control really quickly. Or you could have this set up properly where all of that stuff is taken care of. The disks are locally attached. The hypervisor is running on those nodes, and the backup is running off of Prism Central, which is a native application developed by Nutanix. One phone call takes care of all of that. Ideally, you wouldn't need the phone call, right? And you guys would be fully prepared and you're ready for this and everybody's already been through the testing. But I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that's probably not the case for every single person on the call. So all environments are different. Having this one approach that can handle things like fallback is really cool. I think one of the coolest things that it can do is the ability to do test DR. I've seen customers that have an entire stack of printed PDF on what it looks like to recover in their environment and all the steps they have to go through. And when I asked them the question, well, how often are you guys testing disaster recovery? Overwhelmingly, the answer is we don't. Like it's just, we know it's a gap. We know that we're supposed to, but we just don't, we can't dedicate the resources or the time into taking people away from existing projects to have them do a test failover. And then and even if we do a test failover, we want to make sure that nothing's contacting each other. So now we have to get networking involved and create this whole new VLAN that doesn't route or something. Nutanix takes care of all of that. If you want to do a test failover in Nutanix, you can quite literally, there's a button for test failover. It's not here because we don't have a second availability zone, but you could do a test failover to another zone, whether it's cloud or a DR site, and it can simulate that for you. And by simulate, I mean it actually spins up the VMs, but it keeps them in their own virtual private cloud. So they're isolated from the rest of your network. So it's really nice because you can fully sandbox that entire disaster recovery. You can say, hey, simulate this group of VMs. And yeah, it does include a domain controller. And yeah, it does include a file server. I don't care because it's being completely segregated into its own little box where through the glory of microsegmentation, we're ensuring that even though we're spinning up a domain controller, it's in its own little sandbox that will not have access to any other domain controllers that are running in production. So in that way, you can simulate everything that's going on. You can simulate it with a stretch layer 2 where they keep the same IPs. You can simulate it with IP address management with Nutanix. So it can natively assign new IPs in a new subnet. All that stuff is up to you. And that's its whole, as you can imagine, as I'm rambling on and on about this, there's a whole world of BCDR stuff that Prism Central covers that we can't even really begin to touch on today. But I just wanted to kind of hit some of those highlights so people know it works very similarly to Prism Element. They're just turning everything up a notch. You can create recovery plans to have VMs power on in a certain sequence. You can have VMs come over in groups. You can do all of that stuff through this one kind of pane of glass here with Prism Central. So again, I wish there was more that I could show you. Right now, it basically looks just like Prism Element, only a little bit fancier because we only have that one cluster. And you can't do any of the cool failover stuff on the same availability zone. So we would need 2 clusters to really show you all the fireworks here. And it has all the things you would expect: approval policies for when things get failed over, lists of people that can approve them. You can delegate, you can use a role-based access control and delegate a team that has permission to do failovers. All of that stuff is granular. You can get really finite in the role-based access that you give everybody. So this is the whole. If you have more questions about this, I know people probably do, and it's more than we probably have time for today. If you have any questions about like how you could like leverage Nutanix's availability zones and their disaster recovery plans, please reach out to either your AM or literally anybody from Right Systems. You can even be directly to me. And I would love to talk to you about how we can maybe set this up for your organization, or maybe if you just want to bounce some ideas off me, more than happy to talk to anybody offline about this. Again, these are the hardware section is the stuff you're used to, right? It's all the clusters, host disks, GPUs, and NICs for all of your clusters. It's not that exciting because we only have the one cluster here, but you can imagine if you had multiple clusters here, this would be really nice to be able to at a glance see who's consuming what resources. We already went over these alerts a little bit and their actions. This is very similar to Prism Central. It's just doing it at a larger scope. Audit trail stuff we've already touched on. Again, they redirect you through the application switcher, but we already talked about intelligent ops a little bit, basically being able to see over-provisioned, inefficient VMs, zombies, dead VMs, all that good stuff. You can design playbooks. You can say, hey, whenever you get to 99% CPU utilization for over 5 minutes, I want you to go ahead and power this VM off. That was an example that you're probably not going to use, but just so you know, you have the ability to do, and they have a gallery of things that you can mess with as well to start with. Like, hey, run this eject CD-ROM whenever this happens or whatever. You can create your own playbooks to run these things, either automated or on demand. And I know we're flying here, but there's all sorts of things that if you really want to dig into the weeds for, you can. Cost governance can also help you if you're running things in the cloud. It can let you know how much, what chargeback looks like and how viable your cloud is. You just like connect it to your Nutanix cluster in the cloud, and it can run some of that stuff. There's all sorts of Security Central is its own UI that we're not going to get into today, but we did touch on some of the security settings. But yeah, you can see, there's a reason why we siloed these webinars off into separate things, because to cover everything in Prism Central, it would take all day or multiple days. But I'm hoping that with what I've shown today, it gives you a highlight on maybe some of the things that you can do in your own environment, regardless of what size you have, whether you have 1,000 VMs or you only have 100 or you only have 10. I think the things that I showed today are hopefully things that you can implement into your projects in the future. I don't know if people had specific questions, but please let me know, or if there's something you'd like to see in a future webinar, or even something you'd like to talk about offline, please let me know. But Tony, that's all that I have for the step through. I know that I think we had a stop of 11:30, so just getting ahead of it here. I'm trying to get under the gun this time instead of running over and into people's lunch. So hopefully I hit all the high notes for us.
No, you did a great job, Sky. Again, thank you all for joining and for sticking through this. These are extremely valuable sessions, and we'll probably do another one similar to this next time. But as we build up that portfolio of offerings that we're going to do on these webinars, or if you want to see something customized, again, please feel free to let us know. Sounds like for those of you that opted into the gift cards, those have been sent out. So appreciate you getting on. And yeah, we'll let everybody go and give you 15 minutes back. Thanks again, Sky. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.